Missiles crossing the skies of the Middle East, nuclear threats, sanctions, espionage, assassinations of scientists. When you see Israel and Iran in the news, it looks like a modern conflict, geopolitical, strategic. But the truth is that this score has been open for over 4,000 years, and it all started with a decision by a man named Abraham. To understand what is happening today between Tel Aviv and Tehran, you need to go back long before the Ayatollahs, long before the Iranian nuclear program, long before the revolutions and coup d'etat. You need to go back to a tent in the Mesopotamian desert, where an elderly couple was trying to deal with a divine promise that seemed impossible to fulfill. Because it was there, in that tent, between a barren wife and an Egyptian servant, that the longest fracture in human history was born. A fracture that spanned 40 centuries, dozens of empires, and hundreds of generations, and that to this day has not healed. It all begins in Ur of the Chaldeans, a prosperous city in southern Mesopotamia, in what is now Iraq. Abraham, who at that time was still called Abram, lived comfortably among pagan temples and a sophisticated civilization. But then he receives an order that made no logical sense. God commands him to leave his land, his kindred, and his father's house. No map, no revealed destination, only a promise that he would be the father of a great nation and that through him all the families of the earth would be blessed. Genesis 12, verses 1 through 3. Abraham obeys. He takes Sarah, his wife, his nephew Lot, his servants and his flocks, and sets out toward a land he had never seen. He arrives in Canaan. God confirms the promise. This land will belong to your descendants. Everything seems to be on track. There is just one problem. Sarah cannot have children. We are not talking about a temporary problem. Sarah was barren, biologically incapable of conceiving, and the years kept passing. 5 years in Canaan, 10 years. Abraham was already 85 when he looked at the situation and realized the math did not add up. God had promised descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, but his wife was barren and both were aging. Where was the promised son? It is at this point that Sarah makes a decision that will reshape the history of the world. She offers her Egyptian servant, Hagar, so that Abraham might have a son through her. Genesis 16, verse 2. It seems strange by today's standards, but in the cultural context of ancient Mesopotamia, it was a recognized legal practice. Archaeological documents found at Nutsi, in present-day Iraq, confirm that barren wives could offer servants as surrogates to secure heirs. Sarah was not improvising. She was following the protocol of the time. But cultural protocol is one thing. Divine will is another. Abraham accepts. Hagar becomes pregnant. And the instant the pregnancy is confirmed, the dynamics of the tent change completely. Hagar begins to look at Sarah with contempt. The Hebrew text uses the term kalal, which means to treat as insignificant, to despise. Hagar, who was a slave with no status, now carried in her womb the heir of the wealthiest man in the region, and Sarah, the legitimate mistress, remained barren. The reversal of power was immediate, and the resentment brutal. Sarah complains to Abraham. Abraham, in a move that biblical commentators debate to this day, sidesteps the responsibility and says, "The servant is in your hands. Do with her as you see fit." Sarah then begins to treat Hagar with such severity that the servant flees. Pregnant, alone, without resources, Hagar walks toward the Sinai desert, heading for the road that led back to Egypt, her homeland. And it is there, at the well of Bir Lahai Roi, that something extraordinary happens. The angel of the Lord finds her and makes a promise that will echo into the 21st century. He tells Hagar to return and submit to Sarah. But he also says something no fugitive slave would expect to hear. He says he will multiply her descendants beyond counting, and that the son she carries will be called Ishmael, which means God hears, because the Lord heard her affliction. And then comes the description that became one of the most debated prophecies in the Bible. Genesis 16, verse 12. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand will be against him, and he will dwell in the presence of all his brothers. Think about the weight of those words. Before he was even born, that boy's destiny was already traced in terms of permanent conflict. Hand against all hands against him. It was not a curse, it was a description of reality. Ishmael would be the father of an untamable, fierce, resilient people, but also perpetually at odds with those around them. Ishmael is born. Abraham is 86 years old. For 13 years, Ishmael is the only son, the heir, the firstborn. Abraham loves him. He circumcises him at 13 years of age, according to the covenant with God. Ishmael grows up in his father's tent, learning to shepherd, to survive in the desert, to be an archer. Genesis 21 says he became a bowman, a skilled hunter of the arid regions. For 13 years, Ishmael is all Abraham has. And then God appears again and says something that transforms everything. God announces that Sarah, now 90 years old, will bear a son. Abraham, at 99, laughs. The Hebrew text is explicit. He fell on his face and laughed. And then he said to God, "Oh, that Ishmael might live before you." Genesis 17, verse 18. Look at what Abraham is asking. He is not rejecting the promise of a new son. He is saying, but do not forget Ishmael. Do not discard the boy who already exists. Abraham loved Ishmael, and God responds with a distinction that will cut history in half. He says the everlasting covenant will be established with Isaac, the son of Sarah. But as for Ishmael, he says, I will bless him, I will make him fruitful, and I will multiply him exceedingly. He will father 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. Genesis 17, verses 20 and 21. Both sons are blessed, but only one carries the covenant, and that difference will become the fuel for a hatred that will span millennia. Isaac is born. Sarah, at 90 years old, gives birth to the son of the promise. And Abraham's tent becomes an emotional minefield. Now there are 2 sons, 2 potential heirs, 2 mothers with opposing interests, and a divine promise that clearly favored the younger one. The biblical text records that on the day Isaac was weaned, Abraham held a great feast, and Sarah saw Ishmael laughing or mocking the boy. The Hebrew word metzachek shares the same root as the name Isaac, which means laughter. Some commentators interpret it as mockery, others as play, still others as something more sinister, an attempt by Ishmael to symbolically claim the place of the younger brother. What matters is Sarah's reaction. She demands that Abraham expel Hagar and Ishmael, and she uses a phrase that reverberates to this day. The son of this slave woman will not inherit alongside my son, Isaac. Genesis 21, verse 10. Abraham is distressed. The text says the matter was very grievous to him because of his son. Ishmael was about 16 or 17 years old at this point. Abraham knew him, loved him, had raised him, and now he had to send him away. God intervenes and tells Abraham to obey Sarah, but he also repeats the promise, of the son of the servant I will also make a nation, because he is your offspring. The next morning, Abraham takes bread and a skin of water, places them on Hagar's shoulders, and sends her away. With the teenage son, no camel, no provisions for a long journey, no defined destination. She wanders through the desert of Beersheba until the water runs out. She places the boy under a bush. She sits down at a distance of a bow shot because she cannot bear to watch her son die. And she weeps, and God hears. The boy's name was exactly that. God hears. Genesis 21 verses 17 and 18 record that God opened Hagar's eyes and she saw a well of water. The boy survived. He grew up in the desert of Paran on the Sinai Peninsula. He became an archer. Hagar found him an Egyptian wife. And Ishmael became the father of 12 sons, exactly as God had promised. Nebaioth, Kedar, Adbeel, Mibsam, Mishma, Dumah, Massa, Hadad, Tema, Jetur, Naphish, and Kedemah. 12 princes, 12 tribes, an entire nation born from a boy rejected in the desert. But understand what happened that day in Beersheba. A boy who had been the firstborn for 13 years was expelled from his father's house. He lost the inheritance. He lost the name. He lost his place at the table. And the reason was not something terrible he had done. The reason was the birth of another son, the son of the promise, the legitimate son. Ishmael was discarded not through his own fault, but because the divine covenant chose another lineage. And that wound, the wound of rejection, was passed down from generation to generation as an invisible inheritance more powerful than any land or flock. Now follow the lineages. Isaac, the son of the promise, marries Rebekah. They have twin sons, Esau and Jacob. And here a detail appears that few notice. Genesis 28 verse 9 says that Esau, when he realized his father did not approve of his Canaanite wives, went to Ishmael and married Mahalath, daughter of Ishmael, sister of Nebaioth. The two rejected lineages unite through marriage. Esau, who had lost the birthright to Jacob, seeks an alliance with Ishmael, who had lost the birthright to Isaac. The overlooked ones join together, and this marriage will mix blood and resentment in a combination that will run through centuries. Jacob receives the name Israel. His 12 sons become the 12 tribes of Israel. The lineage of the promise continues through Isaac, Jacob, Judah, until it reaches David and eventually the very DNA of the Jewish people. On the other side, the 12 sons of Ishmael spread across the entire Arabian Peninsula, from Egypt to Assyria, controlling trade routes, creating tribal confederations, dominating the deserts. The tribe of Kedar, Ishmael's second son, became particularly powerful. Isaiah speaks of the glory of Kedar and its skilled archers. Ezekiel associates Arabia with the princes of Kedar, suggesting a confederation under their leadership. And Islamic tradition affirms that it is precisely from this tribe, the tribe of Kedar, that the lineage descends, which centuries later would produce the Prophet Muhammad and the Quraysh tribe in Mecca. And here is where Iran enters, because if you are thinking, but Iranians are not Arabs, you are absolutely right. Iranians are Persians. They descend from Indo-European peoples who migrated to the Iranian plateau around 1,000 years before Christ. Biblical genealogy links the Persians not to Ishmael, but to Elam, son of Shem, and to the Medes, descendants of Japheth. Ethnically, genetically, linguistically, the Persians are a completely distinct people from the Arabs. So how did a rivalry between sons of Abraham transform into a hatred between Israel and a Persian country? The answer has two layers. The first is ancient, the second is medieval. And together, they form a web that no diplomat has been able to untangle. The ancient layer begins with Cyrus the Great. Around 550 years before Christ, Cyrus unified the Persians and the Medes, conquered Babylon, and became the ruler of the largest empire the world had ever seen up to that point. And he did something no conqueror before him had done. He freed the Jews. After 70 years of Babylonian exile, Cyrus issued a decree allowing the Jews to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. Ezra, chapter 1. Isaiah, chapters 44 and 45, go so far as to call Cyrus the Lord's anointed, the same term used for kings of Israel. a pagan Persian king called Messiah by a Hebrew prophet. At that moment, Persia and Israel were allies. The Persians were liberators. But then came Haman. The book of Esther tells the darkest story of the relationship between Persians and Jews. It took place during the reign of Ahasuerus, identified by most historians as Xerxes I, who ruled the Persian Empire from 486 to 465 years before Christ. The empire stretched across 127 provinces, from India to Ethiopia, with its capital at Susa. And within that empire lived a dispersed Jewish population, remnants of the exile. Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, was promoted to prime minister. The title Agagite is crucial. Agag was king of the Amalekites, the people who attacked Israel from behind during the Exodus, killing the weakest and most vulnerable. Deuteronomy 25 commands Israel to blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. Centuries later, King Saul received orders to completely destroy the Amalekites, but spared Agag, the king. The prophet Samuel executed Agag personally, but the lineage apparently survived. And now, generations later, a descendant of Agag was seated at the most powerful throne in the world, beside the king of Persia. Haman demands that everyone bow before him. Everyone obeys, except a Jew named Mordecai of the tribe of Benjamin. Mordecai refuses to bow down. Haman is furious, but it is not enough for him to kill only Mordecai. Esther 3 verse 6 says that Haman considered it beneath him to lay hands on Mordecai alone. He wanted to destroy all the Jews in the entire Persian Empire. The plan was a complete genocide. Haman casts lots, called Pur, to determine the most auspicious day for the extermination. The lot falls on the 13th day of the month of Adar, the 12th month of the Jewish calendar. The decree is sealed with the king's ring and sent to all 127 provinces. On a single day, all Jews, young and old, women and children, were to be killed and their goods plundered. The entire Jewish population of the known world was sentenced to death by official decree of the Persian Empire. But there was a factor Haman did not know. The queen of the empire, Esther, was Jewish. Raised by her cousin Mordecai, Esther had hidden her ethnic identity on his advice. And now, in the face of the extermination decree, Mordecai sends a message that has echoed through the centuries. Who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Esther 4, verse 14. Esther risks her life. She enters the king's presence without being summoned, which could result in immediate execution. She invites the king and Haman to 2 consecutive banquets, and at the second banquet she reveals the truth. She is Jewish, and Haman has plotted to exterminate her people. Ahasuerus, furious, orders Haman hanged on the very gallows, 75 feet tall, that Haman had built for Mordecai. Haman's 10 sons are also executed, and the Jews are given permission to defend themselves on the day marked for the massacre. The date that was meant for extermination became a celebration. Purim, named after the lots that Haman had cast. A celebration that Jews observe to this day every year to remember that in a Persian empire they were nearly wiped from the face of the earth, and they survived. Now pay attention to the pattern. Abraham fathers 2 sons. The lineages separate. One receives the covenant, the other is blessed but excluded. The descendants of Ishmael spread across Arabia. The descendants of Isaac form Israel, and in the midst of it all, Persia, a people descended from neither, becomes alternately the ally and the executioner of the Jews. Cyrus liberates. Haman tries to exterminate. The relationship between Persians and Jews oscillates between redemption and destruction, like a pendulum that never stops. But it is the second layer, the medieval one, that seals the fate of the modern conflict. In the 7th century after Christ, Arab-Muslim armies conquer the Sassanid Persian Empire. The Battle of Qadisiyah in 636 and the Battle of Nahavand in 642 destroy Persian resistance. Zoroastrianism, the millennia-old religion of Persia, is gradually replaced by Islam. And here is the connection that ties everything together. Islam traces the lineage of the Prophet Muhammad directly to Ishmael, the rejected son of Abraham. Islamic tradition affirms that Abraham and Ishmael together built the Kaaba in Mecca, the holiest site in Islam. Ishmael is not a secondary figure in Islam. He is central. He is a prophet. He is a patriarch. And the sacrifice that God asked of Abraham, which in the biblical text involves Isaac, in Islamic tradition involves Ishmael. The dispute over which son was taken to Mount Moriah is perhaps the greatest theological disagreement among the three Abrahamic religions. When Persia adopted Islam, it theologically inherited the narrative of Ishmael, not by blood. The Persians are not biological descendants of Ishmael, but by faith. By embracing Islam, Persia embraced the Ishmaelite claim over Abraham's promise. And this transformed an ethnic rivalry between Arabs and Jews into a theological rivalry that now included the Persians. Ishmael's account became Persia's account, and Persia did not adopt just any branch of Islam. It adopted Shia Islam, which became the official religion in the 16th century under the Safavid dynasty. Twelver Shi'ism, the dominant branch in Iran, believes in the succession of 12 sacred imams. It is interesting to note that God's original promise to Ishmael in Genesis 17, verse 20, mentions exactly 12 princes, 12 Ishmaelite princes, 12 Shia imams. The number is no coincidence for those who study the connections between these traditions. Fast forward to 1979. The Islamic Revolution overthrows Shah Reza Pahlavi, who had maintained diplomatic relations with Israel. Ayatollah Khomeini seizes power and declares Israel an existential enemy of Islam. Before the revolution, over 100,000 Jews lived in Iran, forming one of the oldest Jewish communities in the world, with roots tracing back to the Babylonian exile 2,500 years ago. After the revolution, most fled. Today, estimates indicate that between 9,000 and 15,000 Jews remain in Iran. When Iranian leaders speak of destroying Israel, when they fund armed groups dedicated to that goal, when they develop nuclear technology that threatens the existence of the Jewish state, they are not operating in a geopolitical vacuum. They are operating consciously or unconsciously within a narrative that began in a tent in the desert over 4,000 years ago. A narrative about two sons of the same father, two seemingly contradictory promises, and a disputed inheritance that no international treaty has ever been able to resolve. What makes this conflict different from any other on the planet is that it is not merely territorial, it is not merely political, it is not merely economic, it is genealogical, two lineages that came from the same man and that claim the same blessing. It is theological, two religions that recognize the same patriarch but disagree over which son carries the promise. And it is eschatological. Both Judaism and Islam possess prophecies about a final confrontation involving exactly these nations, these lands, these lineages. Esau married the daughter of Ishmael. The Amalekites, descendants of Esau, produced Agag. The lineage of Agag produced Haman. Haman tried to exterminate the Jews in Persia. Today, Iran, the theological heir of the Ishmaelite narrative and the geographic heir of the Persian Empire, threatens to exterminate the state of Israel. The characters change, the names change, the centuries change, but the structure of the conflict remains eerily intact, and there is a detail that is rarely mentioned. Genesis 25, verses 9 and 10, records that when Abraham died at the age of 175, Isaac and Ishmael together buried him in the cave of Machpelah in Hebron. Together, the two sons whom life had separated reunited to bury their father. The text does not record words between them. It does not record an embrace. It does not record reconciliation. But it records the presence of both, side by side, before the body of the man who was father to them both. 4,000 years later, the cave of Machpelah in Hebron is one of the most heavily militarized sites on the planet. Jews and Muslims contest access to Abraham's tomb. The place where the two sons gathered for the last time is today divided by walls, checkpoints, and armed soldiers. Even the father's tomb is contested territory. When missiles cross the sky between Tehran and Tel Aviv, analysts speak of oil, of geopolitics, of regional influence, of the nuclear program. And all of that is real. But there is a layer that no diplomatic treaty can reach, because it is not on the maps. It is in the most ancient texts of humanity. The hatred between Israel and Iran is not merely political. It is genealogical. It is theological. It is an open score that spans 40 centuries, dozens of empires, and hundreds of generations. And the question that no peace agreement has been able to answer remains the same one that echoed in that desert when Hagar was expelled with Ishmael in her arms. Is it possible for two sons of the same father to inherit the same promise? 4,000 years later, the world is still waiting for the answer.